From the moment he became Prime Minister and learned of Bletchley's work, Winston Churchill understood its extraordinary importance. He referred to Bletchley's output as his ultra-secret information, and ultra became its code name. The distribution of ultra was tightly controlled. Senior commanders were shown only that information which directly concerned their operations. The need to keep the source of the intelligence secret was so great that Churchill insisted that no action could be taken on the basis of ultra material unless a cover plan had been developed to convince the Germans that the intelligence must have come from another source. It was at sea that the Allies first became aware of how vital information from ultra could be. An early example of its potential came on June the 8th, 1940. The British aircraft carrier Glorious was covering the convoys withdrawing Allied troops from Norway when Bletchley decoded signals showing the German battlecruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were approaching its position. A warning was passed to Royal Navy headquarters, but unaware of how accurate the information was likely to be, this chose not to pass it on. The Glorious was intercepted and sunk. The British Navy had learned the hard way just how important the new source of intelligence could be. It was not a mistake it would make again. Nazi Germany might now control most of Western Europe, but Britain's Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, now decided to take the war to the Germans.
We shall not flinch from the supreme trial. All will come right out of the depths.
Even before France had surrendered, he was looking for ways of striking back and of keeping resistance alive in the countries which had been overrun. Just as the last troops were being taken off the beaches of Dunkirk, Churchill was already planning ahead. He wrote to his chiefs of staff demanding the formation of raiding forces which could attack the coasts of occupied Europe. Within a few days, a call for volunteers had been circulated to create a force of 5,000 men. They were to be called commandos, after the highly mobile Boer units which had fought the British for 3 years in South Africa at the turn of the century. 10 commando units, each of 500 men, were set up. They began practicing attacks from the sea. One unit was ordered to specialize in parachuting and using assault gliders. This soon became the basis of the separate parachute regiment. On March the 4th, 1941, 2 commando units and a demolition squad were landed on the Lofoten Islands off northern Norway. Their main objective was to destroy factories which converted fish oil into glycerine for explosives. The commandos achieved total surprise and landed without a shot being fired. The German armed trawler in the harbour was seized. They quickly destroyed the factories and the fish oil tanks. One officer could not resist using the local post office to send a telegram to A. Hitler, Berlin. It read, "Reference your last speech. I thought you said that wherever British troops land on the continent of Europe, German soldiers will face them. Well, where are they?" The commandos then rounded up 60 Norwegian collaborators and 225 German prisoners before returning without any losses. With them they also took 115 Norwegian volunteers. These would then join the Free Norwegian Forces in Britain. in December 1941, 4 commando units landed at the Norwegian port of Vagsø and were immediately involved in heavy fighting. The approach to Vagsø was covered by the small island of Malå, on which the Germans had placed artillery. This was quickly overrun, but across the water in Vagsø, the fighting was intense. It took several hours for the main German garrison to be subdued. The commandos then blew up several factories and sank 8 ships before withdrawing. But effective as they were, commando raids were not enough to stop the Nazis. Churchill needed other ways to hurt them, so he focused on the resistance movements in the occupied countries. In July 1940, a Special Operations Executive, SOE, was formed, as Churchill put it, to set Europe ablaze. Its objectives were to encourage sabotage of the enemy war effort, gather intelligence and prepare clandestine forces to disrupt German defenses. The bulk of SOE's activities centered on France. Soon agents were recruited in Britain to build up and coordinate the French resistance networks. Radio operators and couriers were also trained to support them. One problem was how to get these teams into the country. Submarines, high-speed launches and fishing vessels were all tried out, but the German coastal defenses proved difficult to penetrate. The answer was aircraft. And in August 1940, a special RAF unit was set up with Whitley bombers and short takeoff and landing Westland Lysanders. Agents and equipment were either parachuted in from the bombers or flown in and brought out by the Lysanders. On moonlit nights, a growing number of reception committees would be waiting as an increasingly widespread network of resistance groups was built up. But all the while, they were hunted by an increasingly sophisticated German counter-espionage system. This used direction-finding equipment to locate hidden radios and double agents to infiltrate networks. The work of SOE agents was desperately perilous, and their life expectancy short. The slightest lapse in concentration might betray them to the Gestapo. Many suffered torture and death. But Churchill was sure it was worth it. Keeping resistance alive in the occupied countries gave hope to millions that liberation would eventually come. The British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, was also enlisted to raise the hopes of those living under German rule. They broadcast the news in all the languages of the occupied countries.
Grand raid de l'aéronaval allié sur une concentration de transport japonais.
The German penalty for listening to these bulletins was death. But people tuned in regardless. The BBC also played a crucial role in transmitting coded messages to resistance groups. These always came after the 9 o'clock news.
Message très important pour le chef de Gaël. Attention, il va pleuvoir bougrement ce soir.
For the peoples of occupied Europe, the prospect of liberation might only be a distant dream, but in the middle of 1941 it suddenly became more likely. For by then, Britain was no longer alone in fighting Nazism. It had gained a massive ally. But it wasn't America, which Churchill had assiduously been courting. It was the Soviet Union.